The first crack in the foundation of my marriage wasn't a sound, it was a silence. It was the way Eliza stopped asking about my day. For 10 years, her question, "How was work, my love?" had been the cornerstone of my evenings, a ritual that transitioned me from the stress of the corporate world to the sanctuary of home. Then, about 3 months ago, it just stopped. At first, I chalked it up to stress. Her interior design business was booming, and my own role as a financial analyst was demanding. We were two ships passing in the night, I told myself. But the excuses felt hollow. The silence was replaced by a new, subtle chill. Her laughter, once a sound that could brighten the darkest room, became a rare, polite tinkle reserved for her phone screen. One evening, I found her at her laptop, her brow furrowed in concentration. She snapped it shut a little too quickly when I entered the room. "Working on a new mood board?" I asked, leaning down to kiss her temple. She flinched ever so slightly. "Something like that," she murmured, not meeting my eyes. "Just future planning." The phrase stuck with me. Future planning. It sounded so clinical, so separate from our future. The clues began to assemble themselves like pieces of a grim puzzle. A month after the future planning comment, we were at a dinner party with our friends, Mark and Sarah. The wine was flowing, and the conversation turned to a mutual acquaintance's messy divorce. "God, can you imagine?" Sarah said, shaking her head. "She got absolutely taken to the cleaners. He hid half his bonuses." Eliza, who had been quiet, suddenly became animated. "It's because she wasn't prepared. You have to know what you're entitled to. You have to document everything before you even hint at separation. It's a financial war, and the first shot is never the one you hear." The table went quiet. Mark chuckled awkwardly. "Whoa, Eliza, sounding like a divorce attorney there." She flushed, taking a swift sip of her wine. "Just being pragmatic. Knowledge is power, right, David?" I forced a smile. "Right." But my blood had run cold. The specificity of her advice, the tactical language, it didn't sound like her. It sounded like someone else's words coming out of her mouth. Later that night, pretending to be asleep, I felt her slip out of bed. I heard the muffled sounds of a conversation from our backyard. Peeking through the blinds, I saw her, phone pressed to her ear, her free hand gesticulating sharply. She was nodding, listening intently to whoever was on the other end. A deep, primal dread settled in my stomach. This wasn't just stress, this was a strategy session.
The final, damning piece fell into place because of a forgotten Apple ID. Years ago, I'd set up an old iPad for Eliza, and my ID was still logged into iMessage. I never used the device, it was buried in a drawer. But a nagging, sick feeling made me dig it out one Saturday when she was shopping. The screen lit up, and messages began to sync. My heart hammered against my ribs as I saw a thread with a contact saved as estate planning, Robert. But the messages weren't about real estate. Robert. He still has no idea? You need to secure the joint accounts first, document any large deposits he's made? Eliza. I'm trying. He's just so stable. There's no drama to use. It's infuriating. Robert. Stable men fall the hardest. Trust me. Wait until the Q4 bonus hits the account. That's your trigger. Then you file. You'll get the house, support, everything. He won't see it coming. Eliza. I know. It's just hard to look at him sometimes. He still thinks we're building a life together. Robert. You were building a life. Now you're building an exit strategy. Stay strong. Think of the payout. I sat on the floor of the spare room, the cold from the hardwood seeping through my jeans. The emotional betrayal was a physical blow, a nausea that threatened to overwhelm me. But beneath the raw, searing pain, a colder, harder resolve began to form. Robert. I knew him. Robert was a slick, recently divorced entrepreneur she'd met at a networking event. He'd bragged about how he'd screwed over his own ex-wife. They weren't just having an affair, they were conspiring. My marriage was a hostile takeover target, and I was the asset to be liquidated. The pain was immense, a black hole in my chest, but it was quickly filled with a purpose so clear it was terrifying. They wanted a war? Fine, but they wouldn't be fighting the stable, trusting David they thought they knew. I called my father. He'd built his own company from the ground up, a man of immense integrity and sharp instincts. I laid it all out for him, my voice shaking with a mixture of humiliation and rage. He listened in silence, then said, "Okay, we move fast and we move quiet. It's not hiding assets, David. It's protecting what is rightfully yours from a premeditated raid. We're just changing the locks before the burglars arrive." Over the next 2 weeks, we executed a plan with surgical precision. My Q4 bonus, a significant sum, was legally redirected to a new corporate entity my father controlled as an investment. The bulk of my savings and stock portfolio were transferred to him as a loan, with ironclad paperwork to prove it was a legitimate debt, to be repaid to me after all this was over. We even had the house reappraised, documenting its value before any divorce filing, locking in its worth. I was insulating myself, layer by layer, from the coming explosion. I paid down all our joint debt with my remaining personal funds, leaving the ledger clean but empty. I lived in a state of surreal duality. I kissed Eliza goodbye in the mornings, my lips feeling like traitors. I ate dinner with her, listening to her talk about fabric swatches and clients, all while seeing the ghost of Robert's words in her eyes. I was an actor in the final, unwitting act of my own life. It happened on a Tuesday. The Q4 bonus had cleared into our joint account and was gone 2 days later, moved to an account only she controlled. That was her trigger, Robert's signal. That evening she was waiting for me in the living room, her posture rigid, a glass of wine in her hand. The performance of sorrow was almost convincing. "David, we need to talk," she began, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion. "I've been so unhappy. We've grown apart. I think we should consider a divorce." I didn't react. I just looked at her, seeing the script she and Robert had rehearsed. "Unhappy?" I repeated, my voice flat. "After 10 years, that's all you have? We've grown apart?" Her mask slipped for a second, revealing a flash of annoyance. "It's not that simple. It's a feeling, a distance. I can't do this anymore." "Okay," I said quietly, "if that's what you want." The simplicity of my response threw her. She'd expected a fight, tears, bargaining, something she could use as leverage, as drama. My calm acceptance was the first thing that didn't go according to plan. 3 weeks later, I was served. The petition was aggressive, demanding the house, spousal support, and a lion's share of our joint assets. I handed the papers to my lawyer, a pit bull named Angela Graves, and gave her a single thin smile. "We're ready." The mediation room was cold and smelled of stale coffee. Eliza sat beside her lawyer, a smug-looking man who kept adjusting his tie. She looked confident, almost victorious. Robert's coaching was evident in her poised, if sorrowful, demeanor. Her lawyer began, laying out their reasonable demands. The house, spousal support for 5 years, 60% of the marital estate. Angela listened patiently, then opened her own folder. "My client is, of course, willing to negotiate a fair settlement," she began, her voice like polished steel. "However, our definition of marital estate seems to differ from yours." She slid a series of documents across the table. Bank statements showing the transfers to my father, dated months before the filing. The loan agreement, notarized and impeccable. The corporate documents for the new entity. "As you can see," Angela continued calmly, "the vast majority of my client's assets were legally moved or encumbered as part of a pre-existing financial strategy long before Mrs. Bennett decided to end the marriage. The joint accounts, which my client generously paid down to a zero balance, are all that remain. The house has a significant lien against it, the loan to his father. After its repayment, the equity is minimal." Eliza's face went through a terrifying transformation. The confident mask dissolved into confusion, then dawning horror, and finally, raw, unvarnished panic. Her lawyer's smugness evaporated as he scanned the documents, his jaw tightening. This is a sham," he spluttered. "This is blatant concealment of assets." "On the contrary," Angela said, her voice dropping to a deadly quiet. "The timing is unfortunate for your client, but perfectly legal. My client was simply managing his finances. It is a remarkable coincidence that his wife chose to file for divorce immediately after these perfectly legitimate transactions were completed. It almost makes one wonder what she was planning during that time." The look in Eliza's eyes was one I will never forget. It was the shattering of a plan, the collapse of a house of cards. It was the moment she realized the hunter had walked into a trap. She wasn't getting the house. She wasn't getting support. She wasn't getting anything. "David," she whispered, her voice breaking, "what have you done?" I met her gaze, my own emotions locked away behind a wall of ice. "I did my own future planning, Eliza." The mediation collapsed. Her lawyer, furious at being blindsided, likely dropped her as a client soon after. The truth, as it always does, began to leak out. A few days later, Mark called me. "David, man, I need to ask, what's going on? Eliza is telling everyone you cleaned her out, that you're a monster who hid everything." I was tired. So tired. "Check your phone, Mark. Sarah is about to send you something." Sarah, who had always been closer to Eliza, had been sent a string of panicked messages from her after the mediation. In her rage and desperation, Eliza had accidentally included a screenshot of her own messages to Robert, blaming him for the failed plan. Sarah, sickened, had immediately forwarded them to me. With my permission, she was now sharing them with Mark. The messages revealed everything: the cold strategy, the manipulation, the plan to use the bonus as a trigger, her references to Robert as her advisor. The narrative flipped in an instant. Our friend group, once sympathetic to her, saw the calculated betrayal. The support she so desperately needed to salvage her reputation evaporated. The divorce was finalized with a swift, quiet thud. She got nothing but her personal belongings and the money she'd taken from the joint account, which was already spent on her new apartment's deposit and, I suspected, on Robert. I stood in the empty silence of my house, the home we had built together. The furniture was the same, the walls the same color, but the haunting presence of her betrayal was gone. It had been exorcised by the brutal clinical process of the law. There was no victory dance, no feeling of triumph, just a profound, echoing quiet. The storm had passed. The pain was still there, a scar that would always be tender to the touch, but the bleeding had stopped. I had my sanity. I had my savings, safely returned from my father. I had the house, a structure I could now fill with a life of my own choosing, free from the constant low-grade anxiety of her deception. The greatest prize, however, was clarity. The clarity that came from seeing a person's true character stripped bare of its loving facade. The clarity of knowing I had not been paranoid, but perceptive. I had not been cruel, but capable. I poured a single glass of whiskey and walked to the backyard where she had once plotted my financial ruin. I looked up at the cold, clear stars. The war was over. The peace, hard-won and deserved, was finally mine.